Hello again. Welcome to this podcast, this video series put on by Hudson River Presbytery called Rivers of Faith. And we are continuing on in a series of videos about the various grants that Hudson River Presbytery provides to congregations, worshiping communities, and the amazing things that people have been able to do with these funds.
Yeah.
And we're continuing on with that today by looking at the legacy grant. Now, you might have heard about some of the other ones that we've talked about, but I am excited to talk about the legacy fund that is available. And to help walk through this conversation with us, we have Kathy Surgener, who is with us from the grants committee, and we are so very happy that she is here to help share a little more light about what this fund has been used for and what you might be able to do with it. So,
Yeah.
hello, Kathy, and thank you again for taking the time to help walk us through the legacy fund and to shed some light on it for us.
Thank you, Casey. This is an exciting grant fund, and I'm happy to be able to share some of what we've done and what other churches might be able to do with these funds, because it is the largest of the grant funds and provides the biggest grants.
Yeah. Now, I think reading over the grant description for the legacy fund, and
Mhm.
if we compared that to some of the other things that are on the presbytery website, so if you are watching or listening to this, you can also hop on to the Hudson River Valley or Hudson River Presbytery website and go to the grants tab to learn more. But I think we learned about some of the other ones, like the Challenge to Change grant, which talked about using funds that go outside operational expenses. And I guess how would you sort of define the legacy fund?
I would say that it too is provided for churches that want to try something that's new, or they have a program that they've been using that they want to make a major change or expansion of, um, and wouldn't have the funds to do that internally. We want to be able to support churches and church entities to do the kinds of things that the presbytery had done perhaps in the past, as far as hunger, or uh, they had done the prison reform. They had done various things at programming at a presbytery level, and we had decided as a presbytery to turn away from that and to turn more towards supporting the churches in the efforts that they were making. So the legacy fund just happened to coincide with that change, and it does provide anywhere from $10,000 to $150,000 for churches that are undertaking something like that.
And I'm sure we'll get to it later on, but just a quick cap at the top is so is those funds in a one-time grant or something that you apply for over multiple sort of application?
You can do it either as a one-year grant. If you're applying for the larger amount, then it would be a multiple year grant. Uh,
Gotcha.
I would almost say it's like 50, but if you have a project that needs a big capital investment at the beginning, then we would look at that and adjust it. But it can
Okay.
be up to 3 years.
Okay. Now, I think one of the really neat things that we've done throughout these series is sort of look at the history behind these funds that have been made available to congregations and worshiping communities in the presbytery. And I was wondering if you could shed a little more insight for folks who may not know the background of the legacy fund.
Sure. We had originally had the Challenge to Change Fund, which was funded by the closing of a particular church. And then, I don't have the date, but the Poughkeepsie Presbyterian Church, First Presbyterian Church of Poughkeepsie, decided to sell their building and to merge with LaGrange, with the Freedom Plains Presbyterian Church. And when that happened, they gave away a lot of the proceeds from that sale to individual projects that they wanted to support, but then they gave a large amount to the presbytery at large to give out as grants. And so a whole committee was set up to deal with that, and that required a lot of time and energy. I think it was successful, but we the Presbytery decided they didn't want to have to reestablish a committee every time something like that happened. So
Yeah.
during the time of transition, when oh no, I'm forgetting his name.
Oh, Gavin, I think you mean.
Gavin, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Yes, when Gavin was the interim presbyter, committee was set up, various people to look at sort of a standard way of giving out those larger sums. And so during that time, they came up with this process, and they had, I think, 2 public gatherings for Presbyterians to make comments and have some voice into what went into the grant. And so that's where this came from. So around 2016, we started giving out the first grants.
And do you know what some of those first grants were back in 2016? What they were?
Yes, the first ones were, 2 of them were sort of large Presbyterian institutions that kind of were in a position to be able to respond immediately.
Mm.
One of them was the Holmes Camp, which was in a huge renovation campaign. And they specifically were looking for ways to improve the building where youth stayed, the Nunemaker building. And so that was one of them. The other one, I believe we were transitioning away from supporting the prison reform project, and we gave them a grant to kind of continue that work. And then the third one was, I believe that was Spirit Talk.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting talking about some of these early projects, because I'm sure since 2016 there's been numerous other projects that have arisen out of this legacy fund, and I was just wondering if you could perhaps list them for folks, and if there's one that maybe we can't really judge the name, judge what the project was in terms of what it did. I'll maybe ask
Okay.
you to just give a like a one-line sentence about it. So you mentioned Spirit Talk. I was wondering what some of the other ones would have been then.
Okay, let me just, I've got a sheet here that lists, I think, all of them.
Okay.
I just have to find the, yeah. So I might have to actually pull it up here. In 2016, let me go to 2016 here. I don't know if you can see this, maybe not.
Yeah, I
But
mean, I see, like Connect Faith, I think is another one that's been funded by.
okay. The Pleasantville Hunger Program was the other one, I'm sorry, for 2016. And that was an interesting one because we gave them $80,000 over a 3-year period. And they originally had, let me just put this back down. They had originally planned to provide breakfast for young people on their way to school that needed some food assistance. But they discovered that no matter how innocuous they made it, the kids didn't want to be seen stopping by to pick up a brown bag breakfast. So they had to reassess what they were doing. And one of the ways that they changed was that they started just putting out bowls of fruit for all the community groups that met in their space. And then they teamed up with another congregation that primarily served immigrant community, and started working through them to provide food. So they were able to adapt, and they sent us the changes that they wanted to make, and we approved them. And so that was one of the ones that went forward. And then in 2017, if you want to do them chronologically, 2017 we had Spirit Talk. That was 2017. And then we had the Scarborough Austining Emergency Fund, where they were providing shelter during the winter months and needed a small amount. Really, they only got $36,000 over 3 years to keep that running, to provide shelter and dinner for homeless during the winter months. And then in 2018, we didn't have any new applications. In 2019, we had several. The Westchester Youth Alliance wanted to hire a program director. And so we gave them $80,000 over a 2-year period in which to do that. And they are moving ahead with that work. They've done some amazing interfaith work with teenagers in the Westchester area. And they are applying for their own 501c3 funding. And once they get that, they will be able to access grants from non-religious organizations. They've already worked with the Aspen Institute and gotten really good feedback from them. We
Yeah,
have
I've seen, yeah, these projects have really been diverse in terms of what they've addressed in the needs of these various communities. You know, you talked about the emergency shelter, or
right,
you know, looking at some of these projects. I know that there's one that have responded to the pandemic. There's ones
right,
that have provided space for the creative arts, and
right,
so there's so much that has gone on in terms of people having these visions for what their communities could do to really connect with one another, and that's been so cool. And I
right.
think it would be really interesting at this point to perhaps talk about one, and I know that we've mentioned it a few
Okay.
times already, and that is Spirit Talk. So I was wondering if we could dive a little bit into Spirit Talk, and you could give us a little deeper insight into what that's
Sure.
about.
Spirit Talk was kind of the brainstorm of folks in Peekskill at the Presbyterian Church there. They didn't want to really change what they were doing for their worship service, but they recognized that there were people in their community that really weren't responding to the traditional worship service. And Stephanie Graham wanted to find a way to reach out, particularly to young professionals that were moving up from the city and might have a more diverse faith background or a more seeking background. And so this is part of the PCUSA's New Worshiping Communities Initiative. And they got that small grant originally, and then we were able to help them reach out to these unchurched people who might respond to something a little different. And so we helped them to renovate their social hall into a worship center by just providing the funds for that and giving them some more technological capability. They started holding their first services in July, August, and September.
Oh
And
wow.
then they were continuing in February of 2018. They wanted to expand to 2 services monthly. And they also sometimes meet outside the church in various places within the community. And I know they were thinking about starting a hiking group
Oh wow,
that would do worship on a hike. So I think that's been a pretty successful project
and
ongoing.
I think there's, you know, before we talk about then how people go about applying for this grant, I was wondering, was there anything you wanted to touch on in particular in regards to the new capital loan grant fund? Because I know that is somewhat
So,
newer.
yeah. So one of the things that several of the churches had asked for was funding for capital projects. And that has always been kind of a challenge for us because we don't want to just be paying for capital changes in churches, which really the churches should be doing for themselves. We fund things that they need to have some capital change in order to be able to do their outreach project or a major change in what they're doing. So we did put in last year, we tried to put in a very small line about you could apply for small amounts, and we tried to restrict it, but we immediately got a lot of applications for a lot more money and things that would have been hard for us to respond to. And so the council looked at that, the Presbyterian Council, and said, yeah, really, that's not what Legacy was set up to do. But it is a need that is very prevalent in the presbytery, and we should be able to provide that kind of help. So they have now set up a separate entity that is out of finance and property committee that you can apply to for funds to meet a capital need that you can't manage on your own. And so there's two phases to it. There's one that is strictly a loan over, I think it's 4 years. And then there are possibility of funds for a larger project that would be first a loan and then a grant. That's it has very different criteria than what we have. And we just feel that as a council, we felt that that was a better approach rather than trying to fit a peg into a round peg into a square hole. Yeah.
So again, for everyone who's either watching and listening at this point, especially if you want to hear more or learn more about some of these projects that have come out of this legacy fund, I really encourage you to go to the Presbytery website, click the grants tab, and read some of these stories and experiences. And if any of this has inspired you and you would like to apply for this grant, Kathy, are there requirements for this grant?
Of course. Yes, and the application is on the website, and we try to make the process as doable as possible. So the first thing that you would do is if you have an idea that you think would be viable and that would fit, talk to your session and get their buy-in, and then approach the Grants Council, and we will ask you to fill out a concept paper, which can be 1 or 2 pages, and it has some specific questions that are there in the Legacy Fund grant application. Answer those questions and submit them, and the committee will take a look at that and say, does this fit? Do we think this is worth a full application? We don't want people to fill out a full application if it's not something that we think we could fund.
And just quickly, are other things like having your minutes approved and being up to date on per capita, is that part of the requirements for the legacy?
It is.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
Just wanted to make sure, because I know that has been a requirement for some of the other grants, and just want to put that out there for folks as well.
Right. Yeah, you need to be current and a full participating member of Presbytery.
Yeah.
Or if it's a group like the Westchester Youth Alliance, then the criteria are a little different. But
yeah. And I guess the last question is, and maybe I think you've sort of hinted on that already, but is there a process people should go about in terms of if they have questions about the application process, about who they contact? I imagine, if they reach out to the Presbytery office, we would be able to put them in touch with someone from the grants committee.
Right. Once you've submitted your concept paper, if the committee says, oh yeah, this is something we want to learn more about, and we're going to encourage them to fill out a full application, you will be assigned a person from the grants committee that will walk through the process with you.
Oh, that's very helpful.
Yeah, answer any questions that you have. And what will probably happen is that person will tell you what we liked and tell you about the application process, answer any questions you have as you fill it out. You would submit the full application. We would take a look at it. We might have questions or concerns. Then the liaison would get back to you with those and help you figure out, do you want to make changes that would allow this to go forward, or what do you want to do? Then it would be looked at again. And usually that's about how long it would take. So it's a couple of meetings usually.
Yeah. Well, that's very helpful. So thank you, Kathy. And once again, I encourage you to go to our website, the Hudson River Presbytery website, to learn more by clicking on that grants tab, where you can find all these where you can the information, the stories of other people who've received these grants. And I just would like to thank you, Kathy, for spending some time with us today and helping us to learn more about the Legacy Fund.
We're excited about it, and we love being a part of watching the churches take on these challenges and just do amazing work.
Yeah. So thank you, and thank you for joining us for this episode
Thank
of
you,
Rivers of
Casey.
Faith. And we'll see you again with another video and recording about the life and happenings that are happening here in Hudson River Presbytery. So until next time, see you then.
Okay.